They laughed at me. At my own sister's engagement party. They thought I was just a cleaner. But that night, everything changed. Because I'm not who they think I am. My name is Ava Brooks. The night of my sister's engagement party was supposed to be a celebration, but it became the moment when everyone showed me exactly who they thought I was. They underestimated me. They mistook me for the help. What they didn't know is that I was the richest person in the room. When I arrived at the Seafarer Country Club in Charleston, I was wearing a simple navy jumpsuit. I had come straight from checking on one of our new data centers, and I didn't care to change. But appearances mattered here. The valet frowned at me and muttered that the service entrance was around back. A server shoved a towel into my hands and told me to clean up a spill. To them, I looked like staff. Not a guest. I could have corrected them, but I didn't. I learned long ago to let people reveal themselves before I revealed anything at all. Inside the glass garden pavilion, everything glittered: string quartet, champagne towers, and my mother orchestrating it all like a stage manager. When she saw me, she sighed in disappointment. "Ava, why are you dressed like that? Please don't make tonight difficult." My younger sister Lily, glowing in her white dress, ran over to hug me. She never cared about appearances. "I'm just glad you came," she whispered. Her fiancé, Colton Hale, arrived with his grandmother Evelyn, the formidable matriarch of his old money family. Evelyn gave me one look and said coolly, "We do like an efficient staff." "Who hired her?" Colton smirked. "Sweetheart, there's a spill by the stage." I kept quiet, but inside I burned. Cameras flashed as Colton made his toast about legacies of excellence. I tried to stay close to Lily, but when a glass shattered, the planner snapped at me, "Cleaner, now." My own mother hissed, "Ava, please, just help." So I knelt and picked up shards while guests stared. Lily crouched beside me, furious. "Screw them," she whispered. "Come with me." On the balcony, she asked if I was okay. I said I was fine, but she twisted the little silver wire ring I had made her years ago, the one she wore whenever she felt nervous. She hated what Colton's family demanded of her. I told her, "You don't owe them your shape." At that moment my phone buzzed. My COO, Noah, had texted. The board signed the final papers. We had closed the largest fintech deal in the Southeast. Hours earlier I had become one of the wealthiest women in the country. But nobody here knew. Back inside, Evelyn and her grandsons cornered me near the service corridor. "If you insist on loitering," Evelyn said, "at least carry a tray. I'll pay you cash to stay off the photo line." I smiled softly. "You don't have to pay me." She smiled back. "Of course I don't." The humiliation escalated. When I tried to stand near Lily, the guard blocked me. Colton raised his voice so the whole room could hear. "Please escort the cleaner to the back. She's making guests uncomfortable." The crowd murmured. My mother looked away. And then the doors opened. Phoebe Lang walked in, Wall Street legend, billionaire investor, my mentor. She wore a simple black suit and carried herself like she owned the building. Everyone whispered her name in shock. She looked straight at me and smiled. "Ava. Congratulations." Evelyn tried to recover her composure, but Phoebe cut her cold with a single sentence. "Your emails found my spam folder." Noah followed with documents in hand. Closing finalized. Oceanteed now controls Horizon Pay and Lowcountry Bank. Evelyn's face drained of color. Gasps filled the room. For the first time that evening, the truth broke through the whispers. I wasn't a cleaner. I wasn't invisible. I was the CEO who had just signed the deal that shook their world. I stepped to the microphone. The quartet stopped playing. When I was 19, I cleaned boats on Shem Creek. At 23, a banker told me my idea was cute and that I should marry rich. Tonight, I was mistaken for staff because of a uniform and a choice to be small so my sister could be big. I don't mind being mistaken for the help. I mind how some of you treat the help. I'm not here to embarrass my family. I'm here to celebrate my sister. Lily, I love you. If this life costs you your voice, I will buy you a new one. The room was silent. Evelyn hissed that I was threatening them. Phoebe smiled and said, she's promising her sister a future. Noah quietly informed Colton that regulators had flagged his off-book accounts. His arrogance melted into panic. Lily slipped the engagement ring from her finger and fixed the delicate diamond hairpin I gave her into her hair instead. We walked out together into the night air by the river, Phoebe, Noah, my mother hesitating behind us, Lily's hand gripping mine. Cameras flashed, but the only thing that mattered was my sister by my side. They underestimated me. They mistook silence for absence. My name is Ava Brooks. I was the cleaner, the sister, the shadow, and the CEO. And I will never apologize for choosing dignity over display. As Lily and I stepped outside into the warm Charleston night, the music and chatter from the party dimmed behind us. For the first time in years, I saw her shoulders relax. She looked at me, her eyes wet but defiant. Ava. You didn't have to do that for me. I squeezed her hand. I didn't do it for you, Lily. I did it because no one will ever make us feel small again. Phoebe joined us on the terrace. She handed Lily a crisp white handkerchief embroidered with her initials. You have your sister's spirit, she said softly. Never let them silence you. Noah came over, phone buzzing with updates. Ava, the stock price just surged. By morning, you'll be the headline across every financial outlet. I nodded, but my focus stayed on Lily. Behind the glass, I could see Evelyn raging at Colton, her lips tight, her hands trembling. Their empire was already unraveling, and I hadn't even raised a finger. That's the thing about power, when it's built on arrogance and cruelty, it collapses under its own weight. Our mother finally emerged, looking lost. She had chosen appearances over me for years, and tonight was no different. Ava, she whispered, I didn't know. I met her gaze. You didn't want to know. She flinched but said nothing more. Lily leaned her head against my shoulder as the breeze lifted strands of her hair. What now? She asked. I smiled. Now we build something that's ours. Not theirs. Not anyone else's. The valet pulled up with my car, not the beat-up sedan they all assumed I drove, but the sleek black electric coupe that Phoebe had sent me when our deal closed. The same car Evelyn once tried to buy and was told was sold out for 2 years. Lily laughed through her tears as the headlights swept across the lawn. They're all watching right now, aren't they? She said. Every single one of them. Yes, I answered, helping her inside. And let them. Tonight, they saw the truth. They saw who we really are. As we drove away, the lights of the club faded in the rearview mirror. I felt the weight of the years when I had been underestimated, dismissed, and belittled. But that weight no longer crushed me, it fueled me. I spoke out loud, almost to myself, but loud enough for Lily to hear. Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage. They never saw me coming. And by the time they realized who I was, it was already too late. Lily took my hand again. Promise me something, Ava, she whispered. Promise me we'll always choose each other over everything else. I looked at her and felt the same fierce love I had carried since she was a child. Always, I said. Because no title, no deal, no fortune will ever matter more than family. And as the city skyline rose before us, I knew the night had not been about humiliation or revenge, it was about liberation. For both of us, my name is Ava Brooks. I was underestimated, mistaken, humiliated. But I walked out of that party not as the cleaner they thought I was, but as the richest CEO in the room. And the proudest sister in the world. The following morning, Charleston was buzzing. Every local paper carried my face on the front page. O'Seenteed's Ava Brooks acquires Horizon Pay in record deal. Financial networks replayed the footage of Phoebe congratulating me, and though the engagement party had been private, whispers of the drama leaked out. People wanted to know, how had the so-called invisible sister become one of the most powerful women in the South? Calls poured in. Journalists. Investors, even old classmates who once mocked me. My inbox overflowed with invitations to exclusive galas, offers of partnerships, and apologies dressed as opportunities. I ignored them all. For years, they hadn't seen me. Now they wanted me only because they couldn't ignore me. Instead, I focused on Lily. She moved into my townhouse overlooking the harbor, trading Colton's gilded cage for freedom. At first, she struggled. She woke up shaking, expecting to hear Evelyn's sharp tongue or our mother's disapproval. I reminded her, gently but firmly, you don't belong to them. You never did. Weeks passed, and she began to find her own rhythm. She enrolled in a design program she had once abandoned. I watched her sketch dresses late into the night, her silver wire ring glinting under the desk lamp. For the first time in years, she was alive. Meanwhile, the Hale family empire faltered. Evelyn fought to save her reputation, but without Horizon Pay and with Colton's scandals exposed, their influence collapsed. They had tried to humiliate me, yet it was their arrogance that destroyed them. One evening, as the sun set over the water, Lily and I stood on the balcony. She held a portfolio of her designs, cheeks flushed with excitement. Do you think people would wear these? She asked. I laughed softly. People would be lucky to wear them. She smiled, then grew serious. Ava, how did you do it? How did you survive all those years of being overlooked? Of being the outsider? I looked out at the horizon, the waves catching the last golden light. Because I knew who I was, even when no one else did. And because every no, every dismissal, every humiliation was fuel. They pushed me down so far that the only way left was up. That night, I wrote in my journal, a habit I had kept since childhood. I wrote not about the deal, the headlines, or the wealth. I wrote about Lily. About the promise I made her, that no matter how high I climbed, would never stop reaching back for her hand, because in the end, power without love is empty. Success without family is hollow. And respect that comes only after wealth is no respect at all. My name is Ava Brooks. Once, I was mistaken for the cleaner at my sister's engagement party. Today, I am seen as a CEO, a dealmaker, a woman of influence. But the only title that truly matters to me is sister. And that, no money in the world could ever buy. Months later, life had settled into a new rhythm. Lily's confidence bloomed with each passing day. She launched a small online store for her designs, and to our surprise, the first collection sold out within hours. Not because of my name or my money, but because her work spoke for itself. Watching her light up as orders poured in meant more to me than any business headline ever could. One afternoon, as we strolled along the Battery, the sea breeze tangling our hair, we ran into someone I never expected, Colton. He looked nothing like the polished man from the engagement party. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes heavy with defeat. He froze when he saw us, then tried to mask his shame with a smirk. Ava. Lily, he said. I've been meaning to call. Lily's hand tightened on mine, but I stepped forward. There's nothing left for you to say, Colton. He glanced at Lily, desperation in his eyes. I made mistakes. I see that now. But I miss you, Lily. She cut him off, her voice steady. You didn't miss me. You missed control. You missed the version of me you could belittle. But that version is gone. For the first time, I saw him speechless. He muttered something about rebuilding, about second chances, then walked away, shoulders slumped. Watching him disappear into the crowd, I realized that our story was no longer about revenge or humiliation. It was about freedom. That evening, Lily and I celebrated with takeout on the balcony. No champagne towers, no gilded chandeliers, just the two of us and the sound of waves against the harbor. She raised her soda can like a toast. To second chances, she said. I clinked mine against hers. To never letting anyone decide our worth again. The city lights shimmered, and for the first time in years, I felt the quiet peace of belonging, not to a family name, not to society's approval, but to ourselves. I knew more challenges would come. Business wars, family wounds, whispers from those who still couldn't accept women like us in power. But I also knew this: no matter what they threw at me, I would face it head on. Because I had already survived their scorn, their laughter, their doubt. And I had turned it into strength. My name is Ava Brooks. I was underestimated, mocked, and humiliated. They thought I was invisible. But I built an empire from the shadows. And now, with my sister by my side, I know, this is only the beginning. Spring arrived in Charleston, and with it came a new chapter. Lily's second collection debuted at a small fashion show in a converted warehouse by the river. Rows of folding chairs, fairy lights strung across the beams, and local musicians playing softly. It was nothing like the grand society galas we once endured, and yet it felt richer than any ballroom. The models stepped out in her designs, soft fabrics, bold cuts, each piece a blend of resilience and grace. When the final dress appeared, a flowing gown inspired by the silver wire ring she always wore, the crowd erupted in applause. Lily stood frozen, tears in her eyes, as strangers rose to their feet. I leaned over and whispered, "They're not just clapping for the clothes, Lily. They're clapping for you." Word spread quickly. Articles praised her as the rising star of Southern fashion. Orders poured in from boutiques in New York and Los Angeles. But the sweetest moment came when she received a handwritten note from one of her first customers, a young woman who said wearing Lily's dress made her feel, for the first time, beautiful in her own skin. Lily pressed the letter to her chest and said softly, "This means more than all of it." Meanwhile, my own company thrived. The merger with Horizon Pay transformed Oceanteed into a powerhouse. There were interviews, board meetings, dinners with leaders who once ignored me. Yet I found myself less dazzled by power than before. Because I knew, deep down, that the real empire I was building wasn't made of steel and glass. It was made of moments like Lily's smile, her laughter echoing in the kitchen, the quiet strength of knowing we were free. One evening, as we watched the sun sink into the Atlantic, Lily turned to me. "Ava, do you ever regret not telling them sooner? Not showing the world who you were before they had the chance to hurt you?" I thought about all the times I had swallowed insults, all the nights I stayed silent when I wanted to scream. Then I shook my head. No. Because being underestimated was my greatest shield. They never saw me coming. And that gave me time to grow, to build, to become unstoppable. She smiled. Then maybe being invisible isn't always a curse. I looked at her, my heart full. It's only a curse if you forget who you are. And we never will again. The waves crashed softly against the pier, the city lights flickered on in the distance, and for the first time, I understood the true meaning of victory. It wasn't wealth. It wasn't status. It was this: standing tall with my sister beside me, unshaken, unashamed, and unbreakable. My name is Ava Brooks. They mistook me for the cleaner at my sister's engagement party. But in truth, I was already a CEO, a builder, a protector. And from that night on, I vowed, never again will we dim our light to make others comfortable. This is our story. And it has only just begun. Summer heat rolled into Charleston, heavy and golden, and life moved with a new rhythm. Lily's brand was now on the covers of magazines, her designs photographed against skylines far beyond our city. She was invited to showcase in New York Fashion Week, a dream she once thought belonged to someone else's life, not hers. I watched her pack her sketches and fabrics into suitcases, her hands trembling with excitement. "Do you think I'm ready?" she asked. I laughed. "Lily, you were always ready. The world is just finally paying attention." For me, work only grew larger. Every week brought new partnerships, new risks, new headlines. But success no longer felt like armor, it felt like a tool. I started funding scholarships for women in tech, quietly, without fanfare. I remembered what it felt like to be 19 and dismissed, and I swore no one else would feel that invisible again. One evening, after a long day of meetings, I returned home to find Lily on the porch, barefoot, a glass of iced tea in her hand. The cicadas buzzed, and the marsh smelled of salt and life. She looked at me and said, "Ava, I don't think I've ever been this happy." I sank into the chair beside her, exhaustion slipping away. Neither have I admitted, but the past has a way of circling back. A few days later, our mother showed up at my office, trembling, holding a letter. Evelyn's lawyers were suing her over debts she had foolishly co-signed for Colton. My mother's eyes filled with fear. I didn't know who else to turn to, she whispered. For years, I had craved her approval. Now, looking at her, I realized I didn't need it anymore. Still, I couldn't ignore her. I'll handle it, I said simply. Not for her, but for Lily, for the girl we once were, abandoned and dismissed. When the case hit the courts, Evelyn sat smug and certain, but she underestimated me again. My legal team dismantled her claims, exposing years of her own manipulations. By the time the gavel fell, her family's influence was shattered beyond repair. She left the courtroom pale and trembling, the same way she had once tried to make me feel. That night, Lily and I stood on the balcony again. The city glittering like a field of fireflies. Do you ever think about that night? She asked quietly. The engagement party? I nodded. Every day. Not because it hurt, but because it showed me exactly who we are. She leaned against me. And who are we, Ava? I smiled, my voice steady. We are survivors. Builders. Sisters. We are women who were underestimated, but never broken. The air was warm, the tide was high, and the future stretched before us like an open road. My name is Ava Brooks. They once mistook me for nothing. But I have become everything I was meant to be. And this is only the beginning of our legacy. Autumn came, painting Charleston in shades of gold and rust. And with it came milestones neither Lily nor I had dared to imagine. Her collection dazzled at New York Fashion Week. I watched from the front row as models carried her vision across the runway, and when the final applause shook the room, Lily walked out shyly, clutching the wire ring at her finger. The crowd rose to their feet. She covered her mouth with both hands, overwhelmed, and when her eyes found me in the audience, I mouthed, "I told you." Meanwhile, Oceanteed expanded beyond anything I had dreamed when I first scribbled my ideas in a college notebook. Headlines called me the visionary of the South. Investors flew in from across the globe. But I no longer needed their approval. I negotiated deals on my terms, not to prove myself, but to shape the world I wanted Lily, and every woman like us, to live in, and yet, even in triumph, ghosts lingered. One evening, after an event downtown, I walked out of the hotel to find Evelyn waiting by the car. Her once impeccable suits were worn thin, her pearls dull. She looked smaller somehow, as though life had stripped away the armor she once wore. "Ava," she said, her voice cracked. "I misjudged you. I misjudged everything. I thought power was inherited, that money was borrowed glory. But you," her words trailed off, and tears filled her eyes. "I was wrong." I studied her, remembering the woman who once shoved a rag into my hand and called me a cleaner. A part of me wanted to remind her of every slight, every insult. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "You don't owe me an apology, Evelyn. You owe it to yourself. The world changes. Either you grow with it, or it leaves you behind." She bowed her head, and for the first time, I saw her not as an enemy, but as a relic of a world already fading. Later that night, Lily and I sat on our porch again, the autumn air crisp, the city lights flickering on the water. She showed me a letter from a young designer she had mentored, thanking her for opening doors that once felt locked forever. Lily's eyes shone with quiet pride. This is what I want my legacy to be," she whispered. I reached for her hand. "And it will be. Because you chose kindness where others chose cruelty." We sat in silence for a long time, the sound of the tide steady and eternal. For the first time, I realized our story had shifted. It was no longer about proving ourselves to those who doubted us. It was about building something greater than ourselves, something lasting. My name is Ava Brooks. Once, I was mistaken for the help at my sister's engagement party. Today, we are no longer invisible. We are unshakable. We are the architects of our own destiny. And the world has only just begun to see what we can become. Winter came quietly to Charleston, the harbor wrapped in fog, the air scented with pine and salt. Our townhouse glowed with warmth, garlands along the banister, music drifting through the rooms, Lily humming as she worked on her spring line. For the first time in years, holidays weren't filled with tension or pretense. They were ours, simple and true. One evening, as we decorated the tree, Lily placed the silver wire ring on a ribbon and hung it near the top. "This," she said softly, "was the start of everything. When you gave it to me, it meant hope. It still does." I felt my throat tighten. "Then let's never take it down. Every year, it will remind us of who we are." But peace doesn't mean the past stays silent. Just before New Year's, I received a letter from our father. The man who had walked out years ago, who never looked back, had suddenly resurfaced. He wrote about regret, about wanting to see us again. I held the letter for a long time before showing it to Lily. Her face hardened. "After everything? After leaving us with nothing?" She shook her head. "I don't need him. Neither did I." And yet, part of me wondered if closing that chapter meant facing him. Not for his sake, but for ours. Weeks later, we met him at a small diner off the highway. His hair was gray, his posture stooped. He looked at us with eyes that once held only indifference but now brimmed with shame. "I thought I'd be proud when my children succeeded," he said quietly. "But the truth is, I don't deserve to be proud of you. I don't deserve either of you at all." I listened, waiting for anger to rise, but instead I felt only distance, like watching a story that no longer belonged to me. "You're right," I said. "You don't deserve us. But we deserve peace. And that means we won't carry your failures anymore." Lily nodded, her hand steady in mine. We left him there, in that dim diner, with his regrets. Outside, the cold air bit at our cheeks, but it felt clean, like a wound finally closed. That night, as fireworks lit the sky over the harbor, Lily whispered, "We're free now, aren't we?" I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. "Yes. Free to build, free to dream, free to live without anyone else defining us. My name is Ava Brooks. I was underestimated, dismissed, humiliated. But I turned silence into strength, wounds into wisdom, and shadows into light. They once mistook me for nothing. Now, Lily and I know, we were everything all along. And the future is finally, truly ours." Spring returned, softer this time, with magnolias blooming along the streets of Charleston. The city buzzed with energy, but inside our world, there was a calm we had never known before. Lily's designs were no longer just dresses, they were statements. Her spring line debuted under the name Silver Thread, a tribute to the wire ring that had carried her through dark years. Critics praised it as a collection born of resilience. Orders arrived not only from boutiques but from women who wrote letters saying her clothes made them feel seen. Lily read each note with tears in her eyes, whispering, "This is why I do it." For me, Osinteed had become more than a company. It was a movement. We launched programs for young women in business, creating paths I had once been denied. Each time I stood on a stage to speak, I remembered the night I picked up glass shards at my sister's engagement party. I remembered the sting of humiliation. And I remembered how it felt to stand up, reveal myself, and change everything with a single truth. One afternoon, as we walked by the waterfront, Lily turned to me with a shy smile. "Ava, do you ever think we'll have our own families? Kids who grow up never doubting their worth?" Her words caught me off guard, but I realized I had thought about it, quietly, in the quiet hours between meetings and headlines. "Yes," I said softly. "And when we do, they'll know their story started long before them, with two sisters who refused to stay invisible." The wind carried the scent of salt and jasmine. Boats rocked gently in the harbor. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a battle. It felt like a promise. That night, we stood again on the balcony, lights of the city stretching like stars across the water. Lily sketched in her notebook while I answered messages from women who saw themselves in us, women who had been underestimated, dismissed, told they were nothing, I set the phone down and looked at my sister. She was laughing, her pencil smudging the page, her shoulders no longer weighed down by fear, and I thought, this is victory. Not the headlines, not the millions, not even the power. Victory was this peace, this freedom, this bond that had carried us from the shadows into the light. My name is Ava Brooks. They once mistook me for the cleaner at my sister's engagement party. But now the world knows the truth. We were never small. We were never invisible. We were always more than they could imagine. And now, at last, the world is beginning to see us clearly. Months turned into years, and with them came chapters one could never have imagined back when I stood humiliated in that ballroom. Our names began to echo beyond Charleston. Journalists called me the silent storm for how I built Oceanteed without fanfare, while Lily became known as the thread of resilience, her fashion house a symbol of rebirth. Together, we became proof that scars could be the foundation for something extraordinary, but success didn't erase the past, it reframed it. One evening, an invitation arrived. It was from the very hotel where Lily's engagement party had once been held. They wanted to host a gala in our honor, celebrating women who transformed adversity into triumph. I froze when I read it. The memory of sneers, whispers, and shame flooded back. Lily touched my arm. Ava. We don't have to go. But deep inside, I knew we had to. Not for revenge. Not to flaunt. But to reclaim the ground where we had once been broken. The night of the gala, we walked into that same ballroom. But this time, the lights didn't feel harsh. The air didn't choke me. And the eyes that turned to us weren't filled with disdain, they were filled with admiration. Reporters swarmed, flashes sparkled, and the orchestra played not as a mockery but as a celebration. I stood at the podium, the same place where once I had been cast aside, and I spoke. My voice didn't tremble. They mistook me for the cleaner at my sister's engagement party. They thought I didn't belong. But tonight, I stand here to say, every woman belongs. Every voice matters. And no amount of ridicule can erase the worth we carry inside. The applause rose like a wave, but what mattered most was Lily, standing in the front row, tears on her cheeks, smiling as though she could see the little girl she once was, safe at last. When the evening ended, we walked out together, hand in hand. The streets of Charleston glowed with lanterns. Somewhere inside me, the girl who once felt invisible whispered, "We did it." We came full circle, and for the first time, I believed her, because we were no longer the sisters they underestimated. We were the women who rewrote the ending, and the world would never mistake us again. That night after the gala, Charleston felt different. The city that once carried memories of humiliation now shimmered with possibility. As Lily and I walked along the cobblestone streets, laughter spilling from cafes and music drifting from open doors, I realized we had finally untangled ourselves from the past. The next morning, news outlets ran headlines not about our wealth, but about our words. Sisters inspire millions with message of resilience. Emails poured in from women across the world, single mothers, students, grandmothers, even teenagers who had been bullied. They wrote about feeling invisible, about carrying shame, about finally daring to believe in themselves after hearing our story. One message stopped me cold. It came from a young girl in South Carolina who wrote, "I thought I was worthless. I thought my life didn't matter. But after watching you and your sister, I believe maybe I can be more. Thank you for saving me." I read it out loud, and Lily burst into tears. "Ava," she whispered, "we thought our story was just ours. But it's theirs too." And that's when I understood, our journey wasn't about fortune or revenge, it was about legacy. Not the kind built in bank accounts or magazine covers, but the kind etched into hearts we'd never meet. Months later, Lily opened her first flagship boutique in Charleston, the sign above the door reading "Silver Thread." Women lined the street to be part of it. Inside, she placed a single glass case with the wire ring displayed like treasure. A reminder of beginnings, of survival, of hope. As for me, I expanded Oceanteed into a foundation, funding schools, startups, and shelters for women. I attended ribbon cuttings not as the woman mistaken for nothing, but as a mentor, a leader, and a voice reminding others, you are not invisible. One evening, after a long day, Lily and I sat again on our balcony, the harbor stretching endlessly before us. She turned to me, her face lit by the last glow of sunset. "Ava, do you think we'll ever stop telling this story?" I smiled. "No. Because every time we tell it, someone else finds the courage to write their own." The tide whispered against the shore. The night grew quiet. And in that silence, I felt the truth settle deep inside me. My name is Ava Brooks. Once, I was underestimated. Once, I was mistaken for the cleaner. But now, I am proof that dignity outshines shame, love outlasts cruelty, and resilience rewrites destiny. And this is not the end of our story. It is the beginning of countless others. Years slipped by, and the story of that night at my sister's engagement party became less of a wound and more of a legend. People whispered it in boardrooms, repeated it at universities, and shared it online as if it were a parable. She was mistaken for the cleaner, and now she is the richest CEO in the room. But to me, it was never just about wealth or status. It was about freedom, the freedom to define myself, the freedom to protect Lily, the freedom to build something lasting. Lily's boutique blossomed into a brand recognized around the world. Paris, Milan, Tokyo, her designs walked runways I once only read about in magazines. And everywhere she went, she carried that same silver ring, a reminder of where she came from. People adored her clothes, but what they truly loved was her story, a girl underestimated, who rose anyway. One day, as I sat in my office overlooking the harbor, a young intern timidly stepped in. She couldn't have been more than 19. She held a folder to her chest, her voice trembling as she said, "Miss Brooks, I just wanted to tell you. I was the first in my family to get into college. I almost dropped out because people told me I wasn't good enough. But then I read about you. I stayed. And now I'm here." Her eyes glistened. Mine did too. I realized, in that moment, that my legacy wasn't in the billions, but in the belief I could spark in others. That night, I told Lily what happened, and she smiled knowingly. "We thought the world underestimated us, Ava. But maybe it was waiting for us all along." We stood on the balcony once more, the skyline glittering, the air filled with the sound of waves against the pier. The same city that once held our shame now held our triumph. I breathed deeply, letting the past drift further away with every tide. "My name is Ava Brooks. They once mistook me for nothing. Now, I live so others will never mistake themselves for less than everything. And as long as there are people still living in the shadows of doubt, our story will continue, because it no longer belongs to just us. It belongs to everyone who dares to rise." Winter came again, crisp and clear, the harbor crowned with lights for the holidays. Lily and I hosted a gathering at her boutique, nothing like the lavish, suffocating parties of our past. This one was different. Students she had mentored, seamstresses who stitched her first gowns, women who had once been invisible in their own ways but now stood tall. As the evening unfolded, I found myself stepping back, watching her glow as she spoke. She was no longer the timid bride-to-be, silenced by others' demands. She was Lily Brooks, designer, visionary, survivor. And I, though headlines still called me the richest CEO in Charleston, knew my greatest pride was standing beside her, not in front of her. Later that night, after the guests left, we sat together on the boutique floor, champagne flutes in hand, laughter echoing between racks of dresses. Lily leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Do you ever wonder what they'd think if they saw us now? Evelyn. Colton. Even Mom?" I thought for a moment. Maybe they'd regret. Maybe they wouldn't. But it doesn't matter. Because we don't live for their gaze anymore. She nodded, eyes glistening. We live for us. The following week, I gave a speech at a university commencement. Thousands of faces looked up at me, each one brimming with potential, each one carrying their own invisible battles. I told them about the night I was mistaken for the cleaner. I told them how the world tried to define me, how silence nearly swallowed me, and how I chose to rise anyway. And then I said, if the world underestimates you, let it. Use that silence as your shield. Build quietly, rise steadily, and when the time comes, let your truth speak louder than their doubt. Because the moment you choose yourself, you've already won." The auditorium erupted in applause, but what stayed with me was the sight of one girl in the front row wiping away tears, her fist clenched around her cap as though she finally believed she could fly. That night, as Lily and I returned home, the harbor shimmered with moonlight. She slipped her arm through mine. "Ava, do you think this is it? The peak?" I smiled softly. "No, Lily. This is just another beginning. Peaks aren't meant to be lived on forever. We climb, we rest, and then, we climb again. My name is Ava Brooks. Once, I was underestimated, silenced, and mistaken for nothing. Today, I live to remind others that they are everything. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, the story continues, not just mine, but theirs, because legacies are not endings. They are doors. And ours have only just begun to open. Weeks passed, and the world seemed to move faster, yet calmer at the same time. Lily's boutique expanded into a second location, this time in New York. She insisted on keeping the charm of her first shop intact, a place where every detail told a story of survival and rebirth. I often stood in the doorway during her fittings, watching her guide young designers with patience and fierce kindness. She had become not just a creator but a mentor, a force who lit fires in others. Meanwhile, my company continued to grow. But instead of chasing every new venture, I shifted focus. I began investing in women-led startups, in scholarship funds for young girls who had been told they didn't belong. I knew the cost of being underestimated, and I wanted fewer people to pay it. One evening, as I left a conference in Los Angeles, a young man approached me. His hands trembled as he held out a notebook. "Miss Brooks," he stammered, "you don't know me, but your story. It saved me. When my own family pushed me aside, I thought I was worthless. Then I heard about how you stood your ground. I'm studying engineering now. And I'm not giving up." I placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. "Never let their voices become your truth. Only yours matters." His eyes glistened with determination, and in that moment, I realized something powerful. My scars had become someone else's map. Back in Charleston, the mansion that once held only shadows and memories now rang with warmth. Not from grandeur or wealth, but from the gatherings Lily and I filled it with: artists, entrepreneurs, dreamers who came alive in the space we offered. The same halls that once echoed with judgment now pulsed with music, laughter, and new beginnings. One night, as we stood on the balcony overlooking the harbor, Lily turned to me with a mischievous smile. "You know, Ava, you're still the richest woman in Charleston." I laughed. "In money?" She shook her head. "In love. In resilience. In legacy." Her words stayed with me as the wind carried the scent of salt and possibility. She was right. True wealth had never been the shares I owned, the towers I built, or the figures in my bank account. It was the people whose lives I had touched. The sister whose laughter had returned. The strangers who now believed they could rise. And I thought to myself, if being underestimated led me here, then perhaps it was the greatest gift of all, Ava Brooks. And so, this is where my journey has brought me. From the girl who was underestimated and mistaken for a cleaner, to the woman who built an empire and earned her place among the most powerful in the world. But more than power, I found purpose. I learned that being overlooked is not the end of a story, it can be the very beginning. Every cruel word, every dismissal, every door slammed in my face only gave me more strength to push forward. And in the end, I discovered something priceless. That true worth has never been about what others see in you, but what you choose to see in yourself. My name is Ava Brooks. They doubted me. They mocked me. They tried to erase me, but today, I stand unshaken. This is not just my story. This is proof, for anyone who has ever been underestimated, that your life, too, can rise beyond what they believe, because sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply becoming everything they said you could never be.